Every empire requires land. But what would happen if two of the most powerful nations wanted to take control over the same area? That is the scenario we'll explore in today's video. As a country located in between what used to be the colonies of Brazil, controlled by the Portuguese Empire, and the Viceroyalty of Rio de la Plata, a Spanish possession, the region of Uruguay was always a place both empires sought to colonize. After a multitude of failed attempts made by the Buenos Aires governor to gain permission for eastwards expansion, the Portuguese came into the picture. It went something like this. "Hello, Your Highness. We have been wondering if you would allow us, your loyal servants, to set up various towns and trading posts along the other side of the Uruguay River. It seems like very fertile ground, and of course, we would love to increase your power in the region." Yeah, little guy. Let me think about it. You see, we're kinda busy at the moment fighting half of Europe. We'll make sure to contact you shortly.
Mr. Incredible, we need your help.
Showtime.
And so, in between the years of 1669, and 1671, the Brazilian and Rio de Janeiro governors asked Prince Pedro of Portugal about the possibility of southwards expansion, more specifically to the area south of Brazil, which was inhabited by the native Churrua people. Therefore, in 1677, Manuel Lobo was elected as the leader of a Portuguese expedition that intended to take control of the before-mentioned area. He was a Portuguese military man who had experience fighting the Spanish in the Portuguese Restoration War. His previous clashes with the Spanish made him the perfect man for the job, especially because of the Spanish claims and interest in the region. At last, during the third week of January of 1680, Lobo, along with 400 soldiers, sailed to what would soon be known as La Nova Colonia do Sacramento. Excuse my horrible Portuguese pronunciation. The main objective of the voyage was the construction of a fort and eventually a small town in the adjacent area. This small expedition of 400 men would set up the first colonial town in modern-day Uruguay, as well as pave the way for various conflicts involving the region. Now, remember how I told you that the Spanish claimed the region and planned to eventually colonize it? Well, turns out that not long after the Portuguese set sail from Rio de Janeiro, the Rio de la Plata governor was notified of the new Portuguese colony. He immediately sent out Spanish spies to determine the number of men, canyons, the Portuguese intentions in the area, and even the width of their new walls. With this information, on August the 7th of the same year, Spanish forces launched an attack on the recently built fort. The battle resulted in Manuel Lobo's capture. I gotta reword that. It sounds like I'm saying the Spanish captured Manuel's Lobo, which means wolf in Spanish. The battle resulted in Manuel's capture, 151 Spanish casualties, and 125 dead Portuguese, with the remaining inhabitants being taken prisoner. When these news reached mainland Portugal, the king and his court weren't exactly happy, since it turns out that attacking a foreign colony without a formal declaration of war is not quote-unquote honorable. Well, the Spanish ambassador in Lisbon responded to the outcry by simply stating that the region where Sacramento was established was rightful Spanish land. As expected, the Portuguese were not satisfied with this response, and with the backing of France, decided to take a more hostile stance. This more hostile stance meant immediately sending Spain an ultimatum, which demanded that the Spanish return the colony to the Portuguese and the prisoners be released. Eventually, the Spanish gave in to the French and Portuguese pressure by signing the Provisional Treaty of Lisboa on the 7th of May, 1681. Said treaty enforced the Portuguese demands and created a commission dedicated to solving the claim dispute over the region. The treaty also stated that should the commission not come to an agreement, the Pope could work as a mediator in order to solve the dispute, You heard me right. Even after 200 years, the Iberian kingdoms were still opened to using the Pope to solve land disputes, just like in the Treaty of Tordesillas. To clarify, the Treaty of Tordesillas was a treaty that basically divided the world into two zones of interest, one for Spain and one for Portugal. If you haven't heard of it, I recommend you look it up. It's a very interesting topic, and yeah, let's just get back to the main topic of the video. The option to question Spanish sovereignty over the claims could be considered as a great victory for Portugal, because until then, Spain had never allowed anyone to doubt their control over the region. As explained by the Uruguayan historian Luis Enrique Azarola Gil, it cannot be judged as an isolated event. Instead, it should be judged within the general regrettable picture offered by the nation and its leaders. But it is worth highlighting as a precedent for the better understanding of the Portuguese tendency in staying in the La Plata River, and then extending its colonization to Montevideo, that the Treaty of 1681 admitted the debate on a jurisdiction that until that date Spain had considered unobjectable. This simple event can be used as a clear example of the mismanagement and issues presented by Charles II. These same problems would inevitably lead to the War of Spanish Succession only 20 years later. Despite all this, I'm sure that hostilities between Spain and Portugal would not flare up again, and even less over the simple issue of a small colony in Uruguay. We're going to solve this peacefully, once and for all. So, there will be peace forever, right? Turns out, peace didn't last forever, because in 1704, during the previously mentioned War of Spanish Succession, the fort in Sacramento was occupied by the Spanish. Nevertheless, with the ending of hostilities in 1715 and the Treaty of Utrecht, caused the colony to once again become a part of the Portuguese Empire. Over time, both the Portuguese and Spanish extended their power over the rest of Uruguay, and the city started to work as a jumping-off point for different Portuguese and English smugglers. This status quo would once again be changed when, in 1762, a contingent of Spanish troops led by Pedro Antonio de Ceballos besieged the city. This was a part of a series of attacks against the Portuguese positions in the southern part of the continent, commonly referred to as the First Ceballos Expedition. The campaign culminated with the capture of Sacramento. Unfortunately for Ceballos, a year later, the Treaty of Paris was signed. More specifically, oh my god, there are a lot of treaties of Paris. Well, more specifically, this one right here. The one that ended the 7 Years' War and saw the colony once more return to Portuguese hands. Not satisfied with this outcome, in 1777, Don Pedro Ceballos took his revenge by once again conquering the city during the Second Ceballos Expedition. This time around, the city would stay in Spanish hands. This, however, would not be the city's ultimate destiny. Yes, there is more. As during the Napoleonic Wars and the total collapse of the Spanish Empire in South America, La Liga Federal, what many consider to be a predecessor state of Uruguay, was able to take control of the town. This, again, did not last long, as only 6 years later, an old friend showed up. That's right, the Portuguese were back, with a swift invasion of La Liga Federal in 1817. They, of course, took control of Colonia del Sacramento as well as the rest of Uruguay. Following what now seemed like a tradition, the Portuguese soon lost control over the city, this time due to the Brazilian Declaration of Independence. This meant they only held the city for 5 years. Nevertheless, the Brazilians did not fare a lot better, since they only managed to hold the city for 6 years. I guess one more than Portugal, right? As, once again, Brazil found itself embroiled in a war. Only this time, it was against las Provincias Unidas del Río de la Plata, later known as Argentina, and what would soon become the Uruguayan government. Due to British intervention and a stalemate, both parties agreed to conclude the war and grant Uruguay its independence. Nowadays, what remains of the colony is part of the UNESCO World Heritage List. And that was the complicated yet fascinating story of Uruguay's first city. Well, thank you for watching the video. I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I did making it. Be sure to subscribe for more history-related videos and overall content, and let me know in the comments if I made any mistakes or if there's another place or topic that you would like me to cover in the future. Thank you so much for watching.